Good afternoon, members. Can I apologise for my lateness? I blame COVID. It's the different ways of getting out of the civic offices that fooled me today. I'm Liam Madden. I'm the chair of this Governance and Audit and Standards Committee. A few housekeeping bits of information first. If there continues fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Guildhall Trust Fire Marshal regulations, if you signed in at the Guildhall, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. COVID-19, please be assured that we have put appropriate cleansing and social distancing measures in place to ensure that this meeting is undertaken in a COVID-secure manner. Limited public seating has been made available. However, this meeting has also been webcast to allow the public to attend remotely if they so wish. Can I please ask members to remain seated throughout the duration of the meeting, and you're advised to wear a mask covering unless seated. Live web streaming. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed and the camera zooms in to show the speaker. This is linked to the microphones, therefore can I please remind all attendees to turn their microphones on to speak and then off again once you have finished speaking. Members of the public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please be advised that the public seating area is not in view of the camera using the website at this meeting. It's great, this, isn't it? Can you have a script? Can I now, so I've introduced myself as the chair of the meeting. Could I ask members to introduce themselves, please? Ryan, I'll start with you.
Councillor Ryan Brent, Standing Deputy for the Conservative Group.
Councillor Lee, and I have no interest to declare.
Councillor Rob Wood, I'm a Standing Deputy. I won't be voting. I was here in case you needed a Standing Deputy, Chair.
Councillor Graham Heaney, I'm Standing Deputy for the Labour Group.
Councillor Stuart Brown from the Liberal Democrat Group.
Okay, thank you. Well, that's it, isn't it? Can I thank you all for that? Can I welcome particularly Councillor Heaney standing in for Councillor Graddick today, and Councillor Brent standing in for a Conservative. Thank you. Could I ask the officers to introduce themselves, please?
I'm Michael Lloyd. I'm the Finance Manager for Technical and Financial Planning.
I'm Julian Pike, Deputy Director of Finance.
David White, External Audit Manager for Manson Young.
Peter Bell, City Solicitor.
Fahad Ijaz, Assistant Manager at EY.
Kelly Nash, Corporate Performance Manager.
Paul Somerset, Deputy Chief Internal Auditor.
James Harris, Senior Local Democracy Officer.
Okay, thank you all very much for that.
Could I do a plea, please,
sorry.
Mr. Chairman? No, it's all right. I normally got this and I can hear all right. But of the officers, I heard one, Kelly, and the guy there. So I just wondered if people would speak close to the microphone just for myself. I'm so sorry, but, you know, this isn't working this time. Very, very sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that. And we do have apologies. I did mention them earlier on, but we have apologies from Councillor Charlotte Gurada and from Councillor Simon Bosha. Okay. Those are the only two we received. Is that correct, James?
Thank you, Chair. That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Can we now move on to any declarations of interest, members? None? Okay. Can we move on to the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of July, please? What I'll do is page by page for accuracy and matters arising. Okay? And I'm going to do with a big number on them as opposed to the little number. So the first page will be page 7. Page 7. page 8, page 9. I just have one on that. I don't know if it's answerable. It's the, did I say page 9 I hope? It's the second paragraph down. There was one outstanding item in relation to Ravelin. Is there any update on that? Paul, have you any update?
Included in our progress report is the results of the Ravelin audit.
It's there then, thank you, I must have missed it. Page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, and page 13. Okay, I can sign those as a correct record. Thank you. Could we move on to item 4, please, which is Corporate Performance Report, Quarter 1, 21-22. Kelly Nash, would you like to introduce this, please?
Thank you, Chair. So, for members of the committee that have been here some time, they'll remember this from pre-pandemic, and it's resuming the regular quarterly performance reports that we bring to the committee to summarise organisational performance. What we're including in the current format is director summaries of their service areas, KPIs linked to organisational priorities, and what you'll also see we've started to develop is a set of corporate performance indicators around corporate health, and we also bring to you a summary of performance around major projects that the organisation's undertaking. This is a quarter 1 for 21-22, and it's the first one that we've done for several quarters because of a break due to the pandemic, where it was agreed that we would pause performance reporting to preserve officer capacity, but also because so much of what our business as usual activity was impacted, and therefore the performance report ceased to be a sort of accurate record of what was actually happening. So we've now resumed the reporting, and I think it's just really important to note that this is an important part of the internal control framework, so it's an important thing that we have started doing that again. Obviously it gives you a picture of the breadth of the organisation and the activity, and we will be bringing long-term indicators forward on an annual basis now as well to complement the performance activity. So, as always, we recommend that you note the report. Happy to take any comments and queries about particular areas of interest in the report, although obviously it is a very broad one, and therefore if we're not able to offer a response at this time, we will always follow up in writing outside of the meeting. Thank you, Chair.
Kelly, thank you very much for that. I had a couple of questions, but they're further on the report. I have to say I couldn't decipher between green and amber on the report itself, but I can see what red is, which is the dark. Usually we concentrate on the reds, but I mean it's up to members today what they want to do. Could I ask a couple of questions? Is that all right? I'll tell you the page. It's just one. I mean, we agreed this format, which I like. I know you keep looking at it, but it's just some of the things that just jumped out at me. Page, terrible, isn't it? Too many pages, Kelly. Page 27. And it was just the very top one, the very top one on corporate services. Workforce burnout, increasing staff numbers resigning or retiring, 99% due to state of exhaustion. Is that across the authority? And how do we know it's 99%? I mean, that's a very high figure, Kelly, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. I don't have the detail of the number, but I'll follow that one up and come back outside the meeting, and I'll copy that to all members.
It's very worrying, isn't it, for all of us if that's the situation. But yeah, if you follow up on that one. The other one was just and I know there's only 2 people involved in it. It's page 30, and it's 3 down apprenticeships, and the numbers are 14, and in red. Kelly, why is there a delay in that, or in appointing apprentices?
Again, I'll come back on the detail of that one.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Any questions, Councillor Heaney? Graham?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just had a couple of questions, really. On page 22, the regeneration section in my copy of the report has got no comments at all about what's going well, what are our challenges, or what are immediate priorities. So I wondered what has gone on there. Because I think there are some issues in regeneration which I'd like to go on to, if someone could just say something about that, first of all.
All I can say is that the information wasn't received in time to conclude it in the report, but we can either bring that forward as Q1 and Q2 in the next report, or just amalgamate it all as Q2. But yeah, there was just nothing available at time of publication.
Okay. I wanted to move on to page 40 because I wanted to ask a couple of questions about the planning applications. Now, this issue may well have been raised at the committee before, but obviously I wasn't here, so apologies if I'm going over something you've already done, and you can tell me that you've already done it and tell me to shut up if you want to. But the two issues are the speed of decisions for major planning applications and speed of decisions for non-major. Major one's not a problem, it's the one below. Now, I'm aware as a ward councillor and someone who doesn't sit on planning committee that there have been quite a few issues around the progress of planning applications, delays in getting them. I've had casework which has highlighted that to me, where applicants have been waiting for a long time to get what seem relatively straightforward applications dealt with. Is the figure there that we're talking about, the 83%, just over the 80%, is this the applications dealt with within 6 weeks? Is that what the measure is? Is that the measure, or is it something different? Do we know?
Yes, I can answer that. So my understanding, which I will double check and confirm, but my understanding at this point is that those are within the timescale or within what's described as an agreed extension of timescale.
Yeah, okay, right. I don't know how that relates to what we should be doing in great detail, but one of the things I would say is, as a member who's dealt with planning applications, is that I have felt that we don't always get enough information from the planning department about the state of the backlog with applications. It would be helpful, I think, from all members because we get cases, is to know roughly where the state of the applications are, because one request for information I got, the reply said it'll be done in date order. That was absolutely no use to me because I had no idea where the date order was, in terms of how long was it. So I'd just like to suggest maybe that some consideration is given to updating members maybe 3 or 4 times a year on the state of the backlog, because I know we've had consultants in dealing with backlogs, we've had people leaving and the rest of it, so it just would be possibly helpful, I don't know what members think, to have a bit more information about where we are with the backlog on planning applications at particular times. It looks like it's improving, which is good, but it'd be helpful to have that from at least my perspective anyway. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep, that's fine. We'll request some additional indicators included around that topic.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry,
Lee,
thank you. Just a quick comment. I mean, we've, because I'm on the planning committee, chair it now, obviously, so we've moved from 4, just for your information, we've moved from 4 weekly cycles to 3 weekly cycles. And in the current circumstances where, and of course we're only talking about the ones that come to the committee, the vast majority are being dealt with under delegated powers. But you've probably seen that we've tried to, and that will come up to this committee I think soon, because the business was objected to the other day by the Conservative group about, for example, we're finding a lot of hiatus where one person objects to a planning application, and it comes to the committee then, you see, so it gets held up for a long time when just one neighbour has a dispute with the planning application, so that we're looking to amend the rules to speed that up. And of course, say moving to 3 weekly hearings, we can only take so many. These are the contested ones, of course, I'm talking about. And I think you heard a reasonable explanation about the uncontested ones. But the contested ones, you can only take so many to a committee at a particular time, and so far it's been working very well. We've taken on average about eight or so each committee. and we've been getting through them all right. But of course, members often choose to say they want things like site visits and so on, which very often in the end turn to be worthless because the members don't show up who asked for it. So there's things like that. And of course, at the pre-agendas, when the sorts of questions that could be asked by group representatives and fed back, it's very difficult to get members to attend. So very often at the pre-agendas, when these sorts of things could be raised about the backlog, very often, there's only two people there. That's myself and Chris Atwell. So, members can ask these questions and they'll get a reply from Ian Maguire there and then feed them back to the various groups. That's all I wanted to say, Chair.
Thank you for that. Well, Kelly will still come back with a question from Councillor Heaney anyway. Thank you. Councillor Wood, you have indicated, but you're not a standing deputy. You've left me in a difficult situation. You're not here. Yeah, thank you for being here, but I don't think I can take any questions from you. Thank you. Councillor Brent.
Thank you, Chair. So it was just about the Green City agenda. And, page 30 and page 44 is the background graph. And I don't know if I can say, I've just tried to get it on the computer, but I can't get it quickly. So it's just about bin collection misses on per day average. And obviously it's red on trend, which makes sense. But I just wondered if we knew what the target was or the KPI was for actual bin collections, because obviously to our residents that's a very important issue. So it's just if you had any clarity or information about that. It also mentions on 47 in the commentary of the graph. Is it 47 or 40? 44, sorry. So on 44 it says that additional collections were added in September 2020, but it appears that the misses weren't in September 2020, so it's just whether or not the rationale actually correlates with the information on the graph.
I think in that case the additional collections have been added from September 2020 to address the issues in the previous quarter, so I think we would expect to see that go down in quarter two, but we can add some additional explanation as part of that report when we come back in quarter two, because that would probably inform members following up this point.
And then just a quick lead on was just about the vehicle breakdowns, if we can have some more information about what the vehicle breakdowns were.
Okay,
that'd be brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Brown. Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. Kelly, thanks for this report. Looking at Annex 2, we've got the actual targets that were achieved, we've got the RAG ratings. Is there any way that in future reports it might be able to include what the actual KPI that's being measured against is, so that we know, for example, looking just at the first line, 417 families receiving early help is a red rating, but we don't know what the actual target number that we're measuring against is. So maybe an extra column just in front of all the different quarters, so we can have a look at all the different KPIs.
Yeah, so you want the sense of almost the proportionality of the issue being, that's fine, we can definitely look at a way to represent that.
Oh, wonderful, thank you.
Okay, Stuart, thank you. All right, members, happy with that? Okay, can we then, what are we going to do? We know the report in its current format, and we know that Kelly will come back with some of all the points that have been raised at some stage. Thank you. Okay, members, thank you. Item 5, the annual governance statement. The floor is yours, Kelly.
Thank you. So, that's me again. So the annual governance statement comes to you on an annual basis. It sets out how the City Council fulfils the 7 core principles of governance set out in the International Framework for Good Governance. It identifies the governance risks that we believe exist to the organisation and how we'll attempt to address those over the coming year. And it also picks up the report of the opinion of the Chief Internal Auditor. It's already been considered by this committee in its draft form, as is usual practice, and there were some very small amendments made as a result of those earlier deliberations. So this is now presented to you in its final form, approved by the Chief Executive and the Leader of the Council. Thank you.
Okay, members, I have no points in this at all. Has anybody got any points, questions, comments? Okay, thank you. Can we then agree the annual governance statement 2021? Okay, members, thank you. Item 6, the external audit results report year ended 31st of March. I think that's you, David, isn't it? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So our report today is our audit results report for 2020-21, as you say. The report summarises the status of the audit and the conclusions from our work to address the identified risks from our audit plan. The audit itself is substantially complete, barring the points which are shown on page 7 per the big page numbers, page 5 per the EY page numbers. And the principal ongoing matters are around property, plant and equipment and investment property valuations. Our work here is well progressed, but there are some matters arising from the work which is being undertaken by our internal valuation specialist on part of the sample, and in relation to some of the judgments applied in the valuations, and those are remaining to be resolved. It's an area which is impacted by the requirements of the updated auditing standard on estimates, which is applied for the first time from this year, and it's also an area of ongoing significant regulator focus. So it's one that we need to ensure we've done sufficient to get it right and to be able to conclude. The other area which is still ongoing as well is around pensions and the pension liability in the accounts. Again, that's one which is impacted by the revised ISA on auditing estimates this year. And that's led to the identification nationally, and this applies to all audit firms, of a need to perform some further work around the model which is used by the actuary in calculating the pension liability. It's fair to say working through the implications of the new ISA is an ongoing process, and so this requirement has only recently been identified. We're undertaking some additional work now using our internal pensions experts to help meet this requirement, and that remains currently ongoing. There is due to be some guidance in this area from the FRC soon, which we'll need to have regard to, but which we don't currently think will change our intended solution to that point. The effect of the ongoing work does mean that the audit may run beyond the 30th of September, but we would hope not significantly. And it's important to note that that's not a statutory deadline and that there are no financial or reputational consequences to the Council of going beyond that date. In terms of the content of the rest of the report, there are no material audit differences leading to adjustments in the accounts identified to date, and there are no unadjusted differences, so those are areas where we've perhaps had disagreed with management as to whether an audit error has been corrected. There are none of those identified, so there's nothing to report on that as things stand. Should anything further come to light through the remainder of the completion of that work, we would notify the committee and it would be covered by our letter of representation in its final form if required. We didn't identify any value for money risks under that part of our responsibilities at the planning stage, and we've identified none since then, so we have no matters to report around the value for money conclusion, and we have no matters to report under our various wider duties and powers. What we'll do is just briefly go through the risks in section 2 of the report, and then we can take any questions. So section 2 starts on page 13 per the big page numbers, and the first risk there, first significant risk, is the risk of misstatement due to fraud or error, otherwise sometimes referred to as the risk of management override. This is a presumed risk under the auditing standard, so we identify this on all audits, so it's not to say that we've identified a heightened risk in this area at Portsmouth. From the work completed, there are no indications of fraud, and that's from testing of journal entries and estimates, and there are no significant unusual transactions identified outside the Council's normal course of business. That work remains subject to final review, but we wouldn't expect those conclusions to change as a result. The second risk then on page 15 is the other presumed fraud risk under the ISA, and that's around the risk of fraud in revenue and expenditure recognition. In this context, we think that the risk could theoretically lie in putting what should be revenue expenditure in the income statement, capitalising that, so that it goes to the balance sheet and then it can be funded through sources such as capital grants and receipts and borrowing, and it then removes the impact on council tax. We've undertaken testing of the two key areas of the accounts where we think that risk could manifest itself, which is in additions to property, plant and equipment, and REFCUS, or revenue expenditure funded from capital under statute, and we've not identified any inappropriate capitalisation there. I'll just hand over to Farhad to go through briefly the other risks in this section of the report.
Thanks, David. If we move to page 16 and 17 of supplementary reporting pack, the significant risk is around valuation of Lakeside North Harbour asset and valuation of investment property and land and building valued using existing use value / fair value method. So these are the assets which council need to value over a period of 5 years in case of property, plant, equipment, and annually for investment property. It is subjective and it is accounting estimate. It is informed by the work of a professional valuer, and also number involved are very large. So it is an area where we need to devote significant effort. This is the area where we involve our own experts. So we have effectively involved our own professional qualifier to challenge the council. The work is still ongoing, but it is substantially completed as David outlined in his introduction. So I have nothing to say on that for now, but that is where we are. Moving on to area of audit focus on page 18 of supplementary reporting pack. The first one is around valuation of land and building valued at depreciation replacement cost method, which is still ongoing, but it has been substantially completed. Moving on to the next area of audit focus, which is around going concern on page 19. Essentially, management is required to produce an assessment of going concern extended to 12 months from our reporting date. We look at the robustness of assessment, we audit the detailed underpins, and then we verify the disclosure in the statement of account. We have substantially completed this area, and I have to say that this is an area of strength for the council, and we have nothing to report on this area as of to date. The next area of focus is around the council for private finance initiative. So these are complex service concession arrangement that are underpinned by detailed accounting model. This is an estimate in which we need to do work to gain assurance that these models operate correctly, that the inputs to the model are tested and are satisfied that the inputs are correct. And then the output from the model is correctly reflected and disclosed in the statement of account. We have completed the work, noting that there have been no changes to the model in the current year and have no issue to draw to your attention. The next area of focus is pension liability and asset valuation. So again, this is reliant on the work of an expert, so that the council relying on the work of its actuary to determine the material pension liability and assets that get accounted for in its financial statement. We need to do our own work and also rely on the work of PwC nationally to effectively review the work to effectively review the work of actuary and ensure it is reliable. We also do the other things to test the information is going to actuary and test the outputs are correctly reflected in the statement of account. As mentioned in the report and David previously, there is a national issue, therefore the work on pension is still ongoing. Moving on to the next area of audit focus on page 22, which is relating to COVID-19 government grant. So clearly a material and significant grant funding has been received by the council to allow it to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. We have worked essentially to check that it is being accounted for accurately and appropriately in the council statement of account. And also there is a reasonable assurance that the funding claim is actually due to the council. We have completed the work on this area, which is subject to final review. Moving on to the last two areas of audit focus on page 22 and 24, which are group account assessment and the restatement of prior year comparatives in the council comprehensive income and expenditure statement. and expenditure funding analysis, and some other related disclosure as a result of changes in council reporting structure in 2021. The work on group account is completed and we have no issue to draw to your attention. The work on comparative has been completed, but it is subject to final review. Thank you.
Thank you. So, we'll take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Fahad, and thank you, David. Yeah. Any question or comment from members? No. Councillor Heaney, Graham?
Yeah, just a quick one. The bits of the audit that we haven't been able to achieve yet around property valuations, how and when will that be reported to members? Because I don't know whether it'll be the next committee or whether it will happen prior to that in some form or other. How will that happen?
I think that's something that we probably need to sort of agree, but I think there are options around issuing a final version of this report as soon as it's available, so it could be circulated to members, potentially for discussion at a subsequent meeting. Also, then there is a requirement on us to issue what is now called an auditor's annual report under the new Code of Audit Practice, which will include a commentary on the Council's arrangements to provide value for money through its services. As I say, we've not identified any risks or issues in that area. But within that as well, it then summarises the final outcomes of the audit. And so the outcome of these matters would be included in that report as well. That's in place of the old annual audit letter, which members may be familiar with from previous years.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other points, members, questions? No? Okay, thank you very much. Can we note the report then? Okay, agreed. Thank you. Can we move on to item 7, which is the Internal Audit Performance Status Report to 6th of September 2021. Paul Somerset.
Thank you, Chair. This is our standard progress report against the audit plan. Just a couple of things to bring to your attention on the covering report, which I think is page 88 in the pack. In the last meeting, we were requested to look at some reoccurring risk areas, and that is under section 5.3 there. So you'll see that we did highlight 9 areas which had reoccurred from previous audits, and obviously we're going to be taking those forward with the directors for you. Moving on to the appendix, you will see that we are on target for our audit plan currently. Later on in the report, you'll also note that we have made a significant amendments to the plan. This is due to new work coming in, so we have to risk assess what we have in the plan to make sure we can actually meet the target. However, since the report has been issued, we have had 3 members of staff go on long-term sick. I'm just bringing that to your attention, as we may need to make further amendments to the plan in future meetings. We are not bringing any significant areas of concern to your attention in this meeting, but you will see that we've also included the audits we have completed since the last meeting. And then lastly, again, raised in the last meeting was a question around an audit on direct payments. That was reported at the last meeting. We were going to provide you with a follow-up of the actions, but from speaking to the director, they're doing a full review of all the cases eligible for direct payments, so it wouldn't really provide much benefit for us to follow back now, because not much would have changed. So if you're happy, we'll delay that one and report back to you at a later date on how those actions are going. That's all I propose to say, but happily to take any questions.
Thank you, Paul. Can I say that I had a word with Lizzie Goodwin this week, I think, about direct payments, and in the circumstances I thought it would be better to have it to a future meeting, since there's not much update at the minute. Okay. Can I just ask a couple of questions? Page 107, which is estate services, and there's a high-risk exception which in relation to block checks. And one of the problems we had a few years back, Paul, as you will recall, was the lack of fire certificates for some of our particular high-rise buildings. What's the particular problem here?
In relation to the block checks? The issue that we've identified is that they weren't meeting the frequency that they'd set to conduct what they planned to do within the block checks. I would have to come back to you on what's exactly included within those block checks.
Please do, yeah. Page 109, the ABP contract for pilots. The narrative there is quite interesting, but is it something that we should be worried about or something that will resolve itself?
I think I might defer to Peter on the legal position here, but ultimately there's a contract between the two of us which is unsigned. How much of a risk that presents if there was ever a dispute with the contract, I think Peter would be able to kind of give a bit more information on that one. Was that the exception you were referring to? The contract one or the KPIs?
Yes. Have you any legal position, Peter? Shall we pass on?
What I'd say to that, Councillor Madden, is this. The poor issue about pilots has been on the sort of radar for a long time. It's associated with the nature of the potential pension cost. It's well known to us and it exists. It's no longer on the risk register as far as I'm concerned, but I'll have another look at it when I go back to the office and check it out again for you. If there's anything worrying, I'll report it to you. All right?
Okay, thank you. And just a couple more here, Paul. Page 110. I'll take one page, 110 and 111 together because it's not. The concern is the second follow-up confirmed that it was a high risk. We had a second follow-up the first one was in relation to learning and development, and the second one, the apprenticeship levy. And that was a high risk, and some paperwork appeared and gone missing. We talk about 25% of the apprentices. I mean, it's 2 out of 8, but still, it seems bad form that we haven't got all our ducks in a row on apprenticeships particularly. But the question is, how often do we keep going back and back, i.e. internal audit, in order to get the right answer?
So our standard procedure is if we raise a high risk from what we call a full audit, the first audit, we will then follow that up in the next financial year unless the risk was critical, which we then follow up within 3 months. If when we complete the follow-up in the financial year and the risks are still open, we then conduct a second follow-up, which is the 2 you're referring to. If they still remain open in the next financial year, we would consider redoing a full audit and starting from the beginning again to look at the entire process because things hadn't moved. Obviously, the small caveat there is they would still be risk assessed as part of our normal audit plan process, but the fact that there's outstanding actions from 2 follow-ups would obviously push them up into the full audit. So an example there, I think if we've noted earlier in the report, we were going to look at hire cars again because that had a second follow-up where we didn't move, so we've now put that in as a full audit for this year. So it kind of goes full audit, follow-up, second. If they're still open, we do another full audit in the next year.
Okay, thank you. But do you ever, if you're doing a second follow-up, do you notify the Section 151 officer and the Chief Executive? If the internal audit aren't satisfied that something should have been done when it was pointed out in the first place?
If we ever have significant concerns, we attend a corporate governance group, which is attended by both those officers, and that's where we raise with them if we have any concerns. So that's the most likely forum where we'd raise those issues.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any questions or points, members? No, okay, thank you. Thank you, Paul. Members, then, can we note the audit report and the issues that were raised that Paul will come back on? Okay, members? Thank you. Can I say, Kelly and Paul, and anybody else, once you've done your bit, if you want to go, please do so. I mean, particularly it's a Friday afternoon, so I don't want to detain you here because those are the only 2. You have 2 items, you know, 1 poll. So if you wish to go, just slip out. Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor, I've got one more at the end for Lizzie, the data breaches report, so I'll be staying.
Where is it?
It's the last item.
Oh, the data security. Have you got that?
Lizzie's the information risk owner, so I'm deputising for Lizzie on that one.
I had somebody completely different time to do that. Well, let's do that, Paul, now. Let's do item 12.
No, I'm more than happy to stay, Councillor, because I like to stay and listen to the rest of them anyway, so I'm in no rush.
But let's do item 12.
Okay, if you're happy to.
Yep.
So,
Go on, carry on, Paul, sorry.
this is a data security report which we bring to you twice a year. Hopefully you'll find the report interesting. It's got lots of statistics and details as to what data breaches we've had. For people that may not have seen this report before, I think it's worth noting that we're always going to have some data breaches to the nature of what we do and how much data we hold. Hopefully there's enough information in there for you. If you have any specific questions, I will need to speak to Lizzie or our data protection officer and come back to you, but hopefully the report speaks for itself. I don't have anything further to add, but happy to take any questions and I'll do my best to answer them.
Okay, thank you, Paul. I have no questions on them at all. Councillor Brown, Stewart?
Thank you, Chair. A fairly simple question. Obviously, being new to the council and new to this committee, my question is this a normal rate for a 6-month reporting period?
I think it's hard to say what a normal rate is. We haven't brought this to your attention to raise significant concerns, so I think you can take some assurance from that. We're not saying we're worried about this, but saying what a normal level is very difficult.
Okay, Stuart. Okay, thank you. Any other points, questions, members? On this issue? No? Okay. See what happens. Can I say that I didn't give preferential treatment to Paul simply because he went to school with all my sons? Okay, that was just to get the item out of the way and let him believe he wanted to do so. Okay, thank you. So we note that report. Thank you. Item 8, isn't it? Item 8, the statement of accounts.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, could I just remind members that we did have a briefing on this because we wanted members to get as much information as they could on it in advance of this meeting, not to curtail debate, but if there are any questions that they thought were pertinent that hadn't been answered in the report itself, we wanted those brought forward. And I think, if I remember, Julian, I went away, but I did ask you to send out an email, which you did, asking for any information from any points from members that could be raised in advance of this meeting.
That's correct, Chair.
Okay.
It was sent to all members and deputies.
Okay, thank you. So, Julian?
Yes, thank you, Chair. The document that we're seeking your approval for actually relates to the audit findings report that you just heard under item 6. So it's that audit findings report is referring to this document that we're about to seek your approval for. Before we do that, by way of background, to give you a bit of an idea what goes into preparing the statements of accounts, the initial planning for the preparation of statement of accounts began in the autumn of 2020, with work commencing in earnest in March 2021. The accounts payable and accounts receivable subledgers were then closed at the 31st of March, and that was done during the first week of April. And by the 16th of April, the finance teams had completed the closure of their service revenue accounts. It's at this point that my colleague on my left, Michael Lloyd, and his team then took over to produce the statement of accounts which are before you today, and Chris Ward, in his capacity of Section 151 officer, signed the draft statements on the 3rd of June and subsequently re-signed this latest version, which includes the correction of a number of typographical errors and 5 non-trivial amendments agreed with our auditors. Alongside this work, the external auditors met with us in March 2021 to plan their visits, completing their interim review in March 2021, and then returning in June 2021 to undertake the full audit, which has resulted in the audit results report noted earlier on this agenda under item 6. As Councillor Madden says, on the 3rd of September, members of Governance and Audit and Standards Committee received a presentation on the statements of accounts, and a copy of this was circulated afterwards for information. During that presentation, and included within this report before you, members were advised of the 5 non-trivial changes to the statement of accounts agreed with our auditors, and since the meeting of the 3rd of September, there have been no further trivial amendments at this stage. I'll now ask Mike to take you through the report's recommendations, and then we'll be pleased to receive any questions.
Okay, thanks, Julian. What we are recommending is that you approve the statement of accounts. We're also recommending that the chair be given delegated authority to sign an amended set of accounts after today, should this be required, which could be the case because, as you heard earlier, the audit hasn't been concluded yet. Obviously, do our best to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Thank you, Michael. It's a massive report, isn't it? And I have lots of questions on it. But I don't know how to deal with them. I'm sitting here thinking what's the best thing to do. So maybe if I just get rid of my questions, which some other people might have had, and then deal with it that way. I did raise the questions, I think, of some of them at the briefing that we had. First one would be on page 152, which is short-term debtors, and also on page 153, tying up with the collection fund. And there's in these circumstances, I mean, one should be worried about these short-term debts anyway. I know it's covered in various places within the report. And secondly, should we also be worried about the impairment allowances for bad debts increasing by 7.6 million? That's my first question.
And I think it would be fair to say that an increase in debts past due is always an issue of concern, but we'll obviously do our best to recover them, and we will go on trying to recover them until there are no more practical means of continuing to do so.
Is this, you have to remind me, Michael, is this the highest it's been, the bad debts?
Yes, I believe it has. I wouldn't like to say it's the highest it's been, but it is high this year, in part because of COVID.
Is it the highest you've seen?
To be honest, that's a difficult one to answer because I don't actually keep a record of, how much bad debt we've had over the years. I mean, if you wanted, I'd have to come back to you and give you the graph or whatever.
It's okay, Michael. It's just, it seems very high, that's all. Can we go on to page 231? And this is where there is mention, obviously, of, which we have to do under the law anyway, but it's the salary of senior officers. And then on top of that is the work that senior officers, or some senior officers do on behalf of Gosport, Isle of Wight, and whatever. We receive a payment from those other authorities towards the paying conditions, I presume. Is that included in here, or does that go into some central pool, i.e. the receipts from other local authorities?
The way it works is that the officers involved are paid their salary, and then the council invoices Gosport for a fee. So the money we get from Gosport doesn't actually go to the individual officers directly.
Yeah, thank you. And could I think I'll ask one for a minute. 238, Michael, and it's Hampshire, which we talked about massively in previous meetings, the Hampshire Community Bank Holding Limited. And it's just in the last paragraph there, payment of the remaining instalment is conditional on further diligence reports confirming progress, whatever. Is there a sort of timescale for that, Michael?
Yeah, that's good.
I understand they are very, very close. I mean, we are talking weeks before their final submission to the banking regulator to obtain their licence. So it is literally, it is imminent.
the city solicitor agrees with you. All right. I think that's me. I think that'll do me. Any questions or comments, members? Councillor Healy-Graham.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Apologies I wasn't able to come to the briefing because I've had work commitments, so I've really sort of looked at this since I've got it. I just got to read a comment on the narrative of the report on big page 130 or small page 8. It talks about council tax representing less than half City Council's overall funding base, with annual rises limited by referendum thresholds which are set by the government annually. That clearly is a restriction on council tax increase. As over recent years, council tax increases have not been sufficient to keep pace with levels of inflation and other costs on the council. Of course, it wasn't just council tax referendum thresholds that prevented increases. I mean, there were decisions by administrations not to increase council tax as well, which affected the ability to raise council. So it sort of doesn't quite say that. And I wonder if it might be more accurate to suggest that the council decided on occasions not to raise council tax in 2010, and there were a couple of other subsequent occasions where that decision was made as well, which obviously had an impact. So it's just a comment on the comprehensiveness of that particular paragraph.
If I may, Chair, the only comment I would say is this is relating to 2021, and the statement is correct for the events of 2021. But you are quite right. Decisions were made historically not to increase the council tax, which then does have an effect on the base that we can then increase the council tax amount by.
Yeah, because referendum thresholds have been in existence for some years. They're not just this year. And also, you do say over recent years have not been sufficient. And the reason they've not been sufficient is referendum thresholds and also decisions not to increase. But there we are. That's my point.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Any other points, members? Any other? Okay, then can we therefore approve the statement of accounts, but I need it seconded. Anybody happy to second this? Thank you. All over the place, thank you. So, can we then, do I put this to the vote then, James? Because it's, do I?
Thank you, Chair. If you just ask members whether they wish to vote for by a show of hands.
Okay, well let's do that. Let's just do it properly. All those who agree that the statement of accounts be approved. Thank you, that's unanimous, thank you. Okay, thank you. Item 9, Treasury Management Monitoring Report for the final quarter of 21-22. Julian.
If I could ask Michael to take this item.
Okay, so the report sets out for Council's Treasury Management position at the 30th of June this year. There were no breaches to the Treasury Management policy. We didn't undertake any borrowing in the first quarter of this year. Unfortunately, our investment returns remain low, and that is a product of the very low Bank of England base rate and the indications that they give that base rate isn't likely to increase that soon. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Thank you. I do like the bit on 2H5 about the geographical risks and the German general election getting into one of our papers, and also the concerns we have about Russia, China, and US. What we didn't anticipate, of course, was what was going to happen with gas and the price of it, did we? I have no questions on this at all. Members, any questions, any points? No, okay, thank you. Can we, where am I? Back. Can we then note this report? Okay, members? Lovely, thank you. Item 10, when I turn over the page, corporate complaints policy. And that's, I don't know who's doing it. Is it? Oh, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So item 10, as said, is the corporate complaint policy. I've brought you a revised corporate complaint policy, and the purpose of bringing it to you is to seek approval for the revised policy, which you should have at Appendix A. It's the result of a review of our existing complaints policy and process, and the key changes in there are to reduce the complaint stages from 3 to 2. This is to allow more time for complaints to be properly defined and robustly investigated at stage 1 and stage 2 of the process, while still meeting the LGO's maximum timeframes for dealing with complaints from end to end. That's 12 weeks. The changes will ensure the customers' complaints are resolved more quickly, and we're able to implement measures in response to complaints more quickly, and that customers will be able to go to the LGO earlier than they currently are because of the way that we currently have our process. It will also increase internal responsibility and accountability for complaints at director and directorate level, where the changes can be made. And ultimately, we believe it will provide a better service to our customers, and it will enable us to enhance the way that we learn from complaints. We've reviewed the policy in conjunction with legal, who've approved the changes that we've put forward, and our colleagues in audit have audited the policy for compliance with the Local Government Social Care Ombudsman's Complaint Handling Code, and the audit report's attached at Appendix B. So the recommendation is to approve the revised policy and to allow for that to be introduced at the beginning of December, which gives us time to communicate the changes effectively internally, to provide proper guidance documents for managers responding to complaints, and to update our complaint system. Thank you. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Charlotte. Could I share that Councillor Boucher and as Vice Chair and I had a meeting with Charlotte over there. She asked for us to look at the policy. We made some changes to it, but they're very peripheral. We actually agree with the principle of reducing the number of weeks, and also, of course, to make sure that there's fairness to everybody involved in this. And we think it's right, but of course it's up to this committee will decide. And I think that's where it stays. And that correct, Charlotte? You tell me that this committee makes a decision, and then it becomes policy. See the power you've got, members. Are there any questions, please? Or comment? Are members happy with the proposed revision of the complaints procedure? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. It's agreed, Charlotte. Thank you. And I know you're doing the next one, Charlotte, which is overview of the Council's complaints, City Council complaints, including local government and social care ombudsman complaints 2021. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report that we bring you every year to provide you with information about the Council's corporate complaints and the complaints that are referred to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman about us. We provide it every year following the publication of the Ombudsman's annual report. So it relates to data from 2019-20. Just to note, the data in this year's report has been significantly affected by the coronavirus pandemic and the changes that we had to make in the customer services team, of which corporate complaints is part. We redeployed all of our staff to the community helpline response, and so although we were still accepting complaints through the period from around sort of March, the end of March to June, we weren't investigating complaints unless they were urgent. So you'll see that reflected in the month. I've provided figures per month for this year so that you can see the impact of the pandemic on the complaint, the numbers that we dealt with. Overall in the year we had fewer complaints. Again, I think that probably can be explained by the pandemic and the fact that people were focused on, understandably, on other things other than complaining to the council. In terms of timescales, we've maintained our timescales for responses at stage 1 and stage 2, and we've improved our response time at stage 3, which is something we highlighted to the committee as an issue last year. We've had a slight increase in the number of stage 2 and stage 3 complaints. We think that's partly due to a number of complaints about a specific issue for children, families and education, but it's also because we've been more robust in reviewing complaints as they come to us for escalation, because you'll note from the report we have only 2 upheld complaints from the Ombudsman, but one of those found against the complaints team for not escalating a complaint because all the points in the complaint hadn't been responded to. So in response to that, we've learnt what the Ombudsman wants to see from us, and we've been a bit more robust in evaluating those stage 2 and stage 3 escalations, which has resulted in a few more complaints being escalated. Just in terms of the LGO complaints, the number of complaints about the council is at the lowest level since I started putting these figures together in 16-17. So we only had 34 complaints made about us. Of those, the LGO only thought that 4 of those needed to be investigated, and they only upheld 2. So I think in comparison to other local authorities, we're performing extremely well in terms of the complaints that are being made to the LGO and whether they feel that we have sufficiently resolved those complaints through our own process first. So I think that compares very favourably to other councils. I think that's just it. In summary, I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charlotte. And indeed, we also, of course, include compliments as well, which we put in a few years back just to make sure that, to try to balance it up in a way. It's no surprise, is it, that the highest number of complaints that's shown here is with housing. And even before we saw this paper, we were talking about that, weren't we, in the threat of housing, yeah. I personally, and I've said this since I was in the council, I have no problem with people complaining about our service. I mean, I think it's good that we're open about it, and it's also good that we learn from experiences of it, all right? Us being human beings, we will make mistakes anyway. But nothing that comes out of there shows it's been done in a bad way in the sense that people have deliberately set in complaints. But I agree we have complaints that people are allowed to complain. In fact, I tell people who aren't happy with the council service and I don't get the reply that I would like to make a complaint. So I do that anyway. But members, any questions or points? Councillor Brent, Ryan.
Thank you, Chair. It's just more just a comment. I think obviously it's nice to have the compliments in there. It would potentially also be nice to have a breakdown of the directorates for the compliments just in a table.
No problem, I can do that for next year, that's fine.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, members, thank you very much. Then that's just to note the report. Is that okay, members? Agreed? I've marked off item 12. That was a long time ago, was it? But look, thank you very much for coming to the meeting. And have a good weekend. Thank you.